All right. Well, Edmund said you're having a good morning, and that makes me really happy.
What about you?
I've also had a good morning. I've had coffee in front of me, and you don't have meetings until 11 a.m. Eastern time, so I'm not a morning person, so I'm up and at 'em. Um, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for your time. Also, I know you're calling these sessions Heart and Hustle, so I wanted to know
hmm
why you're doing so. Like, what does that mean? Is this like the Amazing Parish?
Great
Like,
question.
um,
Yeah,
whatever.
great question. Well, I had to come up with some type of name, and I think I asked ChatGPT to help me come up with a name based on like some values and things that I like or whatever. Um, the idea of a personality driven brand is something, I mean, it's a working title of a name, but I wanted to describe with Bummer Lazarus what is the type of businesses that we're trying to build. And I think a business, like a few qualities that come to mind is you're some type of knowledge worker, some type of communicator, you have a unique point of view,
Hmm.
and you like publishing content. And this idea of the heart, or like speaking from the heart, being yourself, being your personality, like capitalizing on what makes you weird and unique, I think speaks to the heart side of it. And then the hustle side, I like this word, even though it has negative connotations maybe now because it's been used a lot, like hustle culture and things like
Hmm.
that. But I like hustle because it's like, it to me, it speaks of like a Casey Neistat or a Peter McKinnon, or like YouTubers that have to kind of, they don't have a massive venture backed company. They don't have tons and tons of well, now they have lots of resources, but they don't have tons of resources, and so they have to kind of duct tape stuff together and kind of hustle to
Hmm.
get things off the ground. So I would love if these were sessions where people came where they're like, I want to speak from the heart, do something from the heart, be myself, and then I have to hustle it a little bit right
Yeah,
now. That's the point
I'm
I'm
sure
at.
you've seen that TED talk about the main driving characteristic that led to most entrepreneur success
Interesting. No,
being it
what
was
was it?
about grit and this idea of grit.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, this we would say like a virtue of perseverance, right? Or
Yeah.
fortitude, but
I
at the
love that.
same time, this is like something where the spirit of something can only take it so far. It has to put just consistent, tenacious, rubber meeting the road kind of activity for it to make sense.
Yeah.
Oh, I like what you're saying about personality driven brands. What would you say to someone that would rather hide their personality behind whatever good thing that they've created? Maybe they're really proud of maybe their knowledge or what they have to offer, but they would rather just be more professional, right? What do you mean by
Yeah.
personality? Is it like a care? Is it being charismatic, having riz? What is it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So, um, I also think with AI, like content is so easy to make. So content is not a differentiating factor anymore. It used to be you could just write a bunch of blog articles defining things and write useful articles. But companies will be able to produce thousands of articles in a day. So the only reason you'll really interact with a brand in the future, I think, is because you have some type of connection with the brand. And one of the easiest ways to have that type of connection is the person behind the brand. So if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I mean, you don't have to be involved, but I do think it's going to get more and more necessary to have a personality driven brand. It's the word I came up with. It's influenced a little bit by Wistia, is a video marketing platform and company, and they put out a playbook called the Brand Affinity Playbook, and they defined a new term, brand affinity, and it's this idea of we are drawn to brands that we feel strong emotional connections to, and they came up with this idea of brand affinity marketing, which is producing episodic shows to get people to want want to come to your brand. So for instance, they partnered with MailChimp and produced a series of fictional, it's like a short TV series, and hosted it on MailChimp. And the idea was people are watching this episodic stuff and they're having a positive interaction with the brand. So, but I think where I'm passionate about is the personality driven aspect of it. So a person with a unique point of view who wants to be teaching or producing content and building a business.
That's awesome. I'm thinking a lot about what you said about connection and that being a driving factor for a brand,
Mhm.
like the personal connection
Yeah.
with a person instead of just tech or just what
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
given in like a utilitarian
Yeah.
sense, right? I
Yeah.
heard something recently that was, and I know this is maybe a little hyperbolic because we don't like love in a romantic sense like our brands.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in a certain way, there is no difference between what we love and then what we give an attention to. So
Ooh, I
with
love
that
it. Yeah.
idea in mind, like if we give a lot of our attention to brands, like we love it, we have a certain level of relationship with it. Um, there's only a couple things that I watch religiously, and they are on YouTube and they are just sports podcasts. And one of the podcasts I listen to is a Green Bay Packers podcast, and I listen to it every
Hmm.
single day, 30
Oh,
minutes to an
yeah.
hour. And you hear this when you talk to content creators, YouTubers, or you're listening to them
Hmm.
speak,
Hmm.
is that they will have interactions with people in public where they're very bizarre, where people are like asking them about their life that are very personal to them,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and they haven't met this other person, right? So like I know I
Yeah.
know all about this Packers podcast guy. And it's
Yeah.
because they have relationship and connection and they're bought in, they love this other person, right? Like they know the personality and that's
Yeah.
why they're drawn to it, not just
Yeah.
I could get my Packers content anywhere, but I like the guy. Um,
Exactly. If I mean, in the future there could be thousands of Packers podcasts. I mean, I can imagine AI making it possible for there to be Packers podcasts that are using AI that are tailored to where you're from. So it's like, the Packers podcast for people living in Alaska who love the Packers and work during the day or
mhm,
something,
mhm.
right? Or already you can upload a ton of content and generate two AI co-hosts that talk through your content. So if there's millions of options of what you're gonna listen to, well, when you meet someone in person or you meet someone and you're like, hey, I like this person, you want to follow their podcast or their thing. I wonder also too what you think about this. I'm trying to work out more of this term and the word personality driven or the word personality. And it's interesting because I was using ChatGPT to explore the idea. And in ancient Greek and Roman theater, the concept of a persona
Mhm.
is where actors will wear these large masks to portray different characters on stage. And the masks often had exaggerated traits to them to highlight certain emotions or traits of the character. And eventually that evolved into someone just pretending to be the person. So we get personality from that, the origins in this word persona. And it's interesting because in Catholic anthropology, we understand the personality as the expression of the person. So the personality is not the actual person itself, but it's the outward expression of who I am as a person. So I think it's interesting that in the future as well. I mean, even now, I think we'll have more and more conversations about our worldviews because the personality that you put forward or the brand that you put forward has to come from a deep place of values and a worldview. And so I think like our brands are an extension of our personality. If we're a personal brand, we have certain traits of our personality that maybe we accentuate in different ways. And there is a way to do that that's not slimy and gross. There's a way to do that that's like, this is what I'm really passionate about, and showing up. So your online personality, or your brand in a way, is your personality, in the sense that it's a outward expression of who you are. You know. Oh, the other thing it's influence on, Nathan, you should know, is this key person of influence. And let me know what you see in this. This will be helpful. Is like, let me know. Okay, so this is Daniel Priestley has a company or asset or brand or whatever. He has a few of these. One is 24 assets. Another one is oversubscribed and things. This one's called Key Person of Influence, and its positioning statement, let's say, is become one of the most highly visible, valued, and connected people in your industry. You can take a quiz or attend the workshop. So I'm basing a lot of the funnel stuff that we're building, the funnel and business strategy, on advice Daniel Priestley is giving. But this one in particular is helping people become experts in their industry that are well known. So, and actually that's a pretty good line right there, to become a well-known content creator, maybe. But they have these 5 points of their framework: honing in your pitch, publishing content, creating products, partnering with others, and then raising your profile. And they have things that you can do for that. So there's a quiz, and then you can attend their online workshop, which is free, or they have an in-person conference type thing where you go and do all these things. And so I'm sure they have different tools and resources under each of these things here. So my idea is, with Bummer and Lazarus, to take a framework and system similar to this, but then how would we do it? Or what I'm thinking is, how would I do this? Well, I like working particularly with content creators. I'm not as interested in helping them partner necessarily with people, but I really like, for instance, Alan is a great example. You know, he's the key person in his company. He has a unique point of view and product, which is consulting, and he wants to produce content online. And I get really geeky about all the different tools and processes and workflows of doing that, and the discipline and practice of doing that. So this is a great kind of case study or example to go off of what we're building with Bummer and Lazarus.
Yeah, that's really exciting to look at. I guess the next piece is that we wanted to talk about was, where do we start? Your big thing right now is frameworks. Do people start with their framework, their mission, vision, values piece? Do they go straight into what is their product or service, and making sure you nail that down? And
Well, so this is helpful for people listening who are thinking about building their own thing. So if you're a graphic designer, or Alan who's in consulting, or Nathan as you're thinking about building Bummer and Lazarus, what I've been doing to answer that question, like where to start, is, where do I start with most people? You know, what are the first steps normally that I go through in a conversation? And I know a lot of people will say, well, it's just spontaneous. It comes, it comes and goes as things are coming up. But there is a process that you have. A really good book for this is Built to Sell, which tells a story of a business guru meeting a graphic designer and saying, let's identify your process and your framework. And the graphic designer's like, well, there isn't any process or framework for graphic design. Like, I get some inspiration and then I start doing it. He's like, well, but if we had to identify the steps, we could start putting something down. And so for me, the first things I'm always thinking about is someone's goals. And normally it is a rough sense of revenue, like a revenue goal. And usually there is current revenue, There's a short-term goal revenue, which often is some type of survival. Like if you're trying to get something started, or you're just trying to find sustainability, there's some type of survival monthly revenue. And then there's an exciting stretch goal. So this would be like dollars per month. Yeah. So that's kind of where I like to start with people. And then the other thing that I'm often thinking about that I don't know exactly, and it'd be interesting to hear your feedback on this, Nathan. The second thing I'm always trying to figure out is how much time is someone willing to spend on this? So how much free time do they have, like their resources? So how much time could they spend experiment? Because for me, I have Zealous Parish Ministers and I have Bummer and Lazarus, and I might have like a book idea as well. Well, on each of those things, I'm trying to figure out, okay, do I have an hour a week to work on a book? For Bummer and Lazarus, do I have 4 hours a week? Like trying to pin down the resources available to me and then backwards building from that. So if I only have 4 hours a week to be working on this idea, there's a different way I would approach a lot of these things. If I have a lot more hours, then I would approach it very differently. So maybe it's like time available.
Yeah, maybe.
Time resources.
I think an honest answer that people would give is I would give it as much time as it's worth to start making me money. Because at some point in time, if you're going to do like a cost analysis, is my time honestly better spent for me to survive or do something else that maybe sounds more promising? So people could think strategically for their own life, and say,
well, let's so this is I love so many things that are happening in this part of the conversation. Nathan, so you've talked about wanting to be a strategist. Answering some of these questions as clearly as you can, like this is coming up with your own or our own strategy, right? Like it. So I don't know what you might call this, but is something worth my time? Like is a project worth my time? Well, let's come up with a way, like a framework, a statement, a way to calculate whether something's worth your time. Like one example might be the potential outcome is, 4x, or maybe we'll say 1/2 of my monthly revenue. That's just an idea, right? So, hi, James.
Hello.
Welcome.
I don't know if I can stay the whole time, but I'll be in for a bit.
Okay, sounds great. So one idea, right, is your potential outcome is half of your monthly revenue. So I'm willing to try something if there's a potential outcome, and maybe we put a time parameter on it. Like in the next 3 months, there's a potential outcome that's at least half of my. So if your monthly revenue currently is like $5,000, and you could potentially make half of that, you could make 2,500. Well, then it's worth my time. I don't know, something like that. But before you answer, Nathan, I think this is some of the strategy, or kind of developing your own strategy to things, is having a clear answer when someone says, has a follow-up question to something. So I just said, hey, the goals we're going to come up with are current revenue, survival goal, and stretch goal. A client might say, well, how do I know if this is worth my time to even work on? And some of us do this intuitively, but if you could clearly articulate it in a like quote unquote framework, you've just developed proprietary information. I mean, you've just developed intellectual property. Like I have an answer for this. You can tell if a project is worth your time if the amount of time spent in the next 2 months would equal half of your revenue. That's a framework that I use, or something.
Right. Yeah, like a.
So how would you?
Yeah. So if there's 40 hours in a working day, if 10 hours of my week could go towards something that makes to where I'm making like more per hour, right? I think what you're
Hmm.
kind of alluding to
Yeah.
here, and like the outcome is half of my monthly revenue, is some sort of like threshold basis to making something like
Yeah.
worth your time. When we're talking earlier about kind of, I was saying tongue in cheek, asking about the like the workaholism thing is like, you're if you're passionate about something, you're almost going to do it anyway. And I guess
Yeah.
the added work would just be administrative or back end logistics thing, but the creation is going to happen as like a byproduct of your own personality,
Hmm.
Edmund,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but there's also risk too. Like
mhm.
I've noticed that some people, like I have a friend who his risk tolerance is very, very low. So for him, he's not willing to spend even 1 hour of his time if even if the potential is 4x his income and the time frame is 3 months and his confidence is really high. He's still, if his confidence isn't 100%, he's not willing to spend an extra hour outside of work to start something. Whereas like a lot of us here have a very different makeup where it's like, my confidence percentage could be around 20% that this would generate income in the next 6 months. And I have 2 hours a week. So I'll for sure do it, and I think coming up with a framework for helping people walk through those things, I think would be really helpful.
Can I put you on the spot here, Edmund?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
On, like listening to you in a video or now, framework is your buzzword of 2024. James has listened to you for a handful of time, and he knows that framework is your buzzword. Alan knows you, and Alan knows framework is your buzzword. What can you give me a clear definition of what a framework is and how to develop your own?
Yeah, I love this. So a framework is I have a framework for thinking about frameworks. A framework is a clear and concise summary of a complicated concept that breaks it down into components. And so frameworks, a person that I follow a lot is Vicky Zhao on YouTube. Her whole thing is about frameworks. I did this intuitively and didn't realize that this is what I did most of my life. I think some of this comes from
Mm,
having ADHD, but I need like buckets. So if we're talking about revenue, that's a huge concept. But if or if we're talking about if we're talking about a funnel, if we're talking about a business funnel for digital marketing, that's a huge concept. But if I can understand, for example, if I can understand that this digital funnel is visitors times conversion rate times life, we'll just say price equals revenue. If that's my framework for a funnel, you have to get visitors to land on a page, then there's the conversion rate, then there's the price of the product that equals revenue. For example, this is one framework. Well, now like I have 3 buckets to think about. How do I get more visitors to this page? There's tons of ideas I could come up with, but we're first talking about how do we get more people to show up on this page and visit the page? Conversion rate, how do we increase this number? The conversion rate percentage, well, that's the copy on the page, it's the way the page is designed, it's all these, but really the end goal is conversion rate. And then the price of the product, there's different pricing strategies. That's a whole funnel right there. Like that's a complicated concept broken down into parts. Same with clear path of discipleship. Evangelization is very big and vague, but if it's win, build, send, now I have a clear and concise summary that breaks it down into components. So frameworks are really powerful. Some of the best thinkers and most influential people, they're able to think on their feet really quickly because they have lots of useful frameworks that are shortcuts for big concepts. Yeah, so I could talk about for an hour.
yeah,
We should do a
yeah,
whole
yeah.
episode on frameworks because I think they're really powerful. I think the way you start developing your own is a process and a discipline of capturing ideas, organizing ideas, and writing. And I think it's a process also of trying to articulate the steps you take that seem intuitive. So, I mean, James, in practicing the way, like John Comer has kind of come up with a little bit of a framework for, here are these X number of practices, like I forget how many, but here are these 5 practices. Well, that takes discipleship, this huge concept, and breaks it down really simply and says, discipleship is these 5 practices. And that's unique intellectual property. That's another thing that's really important in this world, this business world, is developing intellectual property as an asset that is very valuable, that no one else can steal. And it's your unique approach to X, Y, or Z. And so it's very, very valuable, and it sets you apart from other people that seem to be just like what I'm doing now, just talking a ton. When you're compared with other content creators or businesses, when you have a really clear framework for something, it's very powerful.
So here's a question. Whenever I see a reel come up on my Instagram and it says, here's 3 easy ways you can start publishing more, right? Are they talking, this is more than just like a catchy 3-step thing that they just made up, or are they creating frameworks
I think those can
articulating
be, I think
simply?
those can be frameworks. Yeah, I think those can be frameworks. We could start identifying the key components that make a framework effective. So I think the most effective frameworks are more or less all encompassing. So often those articles that are like 3 easy steps, it's just 3 of an infinite number of ideas, but it's not their core steps maybe, or 3 quick fixes for whatever. That could be their framework. But my guess is a lot of those articles are just, here's 3 random ideas. And that's another strength of frameworks, is it gives people a roadmap to kind of work on, regardless of the context. So they're not seen as 3 random ideas. These are the 3 core areas that you can continue to focus on and develop. And often frameworks are sequential. Maybe it's, gather, build, send, or something. Like there's sequential frameworks. There's so yeah. Does that answer
No,
the
it
question?
does. Cool. We're 25 minutes in. So far today, we've covered
Yeah.
what is a personality-driven brand. We talked about where to begin for developing a personality-driven brand, which starts with goals. Talked about maybe like a threshold of making something worth your time. We've introduced frameworks.
Love it.
Do we want to talk about some of these easy other like getting started things, like creating landing pages, brand, website, email sign
I
up,
think
stuff
the
like
last
that? Or
thing,
yeah.
I think the next thing that'd be helpful, and then this is something if James wants to do this too with us. I created a quiz on the Bummer and Lazarus page.